Have you ever been prescribed like a highly anticipated skin cream only to put it on and feel like your skin is just suddenly on fire?
Oh, yeah.
You're sitting there hoping for some kind of relief, and instead it feels like you've just rubbed chili peppers directly into a fresh wound.
It is intensely painful.
Right. You're using a medication meant to soothe, but your skin is quite literally screaming. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are pulling apart the cellular fire alarms that cause this bizarre reaction.
Yeah, it's a fascinating mechanism.
We're looking at a huge stack of medical journals and dermatology guidelines to understand the biology of your skin barrier, the specific receptors tricking your brain into feeling heat, and, the practical hacks dermatologists recommend to outsmart the initial pain of a drug called tacrolimus.
Because, I mean, it completely defies everything we naturally expect from a medical treatment, right?
Exactly.
We're conditioned to associate healing creams with, like, immediate cooling relief. You apply it, and the pain is supposed to just stop.
Right. It's supposed to feel good.
But sometimes, biology operates on a completely different logic. And the mechanism required to heal chronic inflammation in the long term, well, it requires setting off some very intense, very uncomfortable alarms in the short term.
Which is just such a frustrating experience for anyone going through it. I mean, let's start with the medication itself. We're focusing on tacrolimus ointment, which is often prescribed under the brand name Protopic.
Yeah, Protopic is the big one.
People are putting up with this intense burning sensation for a reason. So what makes this specific cream so valuable that doctors just keep prescribing it despite the painful side effects?
Well, to really understand the value, we have to look at what's happening in conditions like atopic dermatitis, which most of us just call eczema or lichen sclerosis.
Okay.
In these conditions, your immune system is essentially making a massive mistake. The T cells in your skin, which, they're supposed to be your microscopic security guards, they become entirely overactive.
So they're attacking when they shouldn't be.
Exactly. They start attacking your own tissue, creating this severe chronic inflammation. So tacrolimus is what we call a topical calcineurin inhibitor. Its whole job is to sink into the skin and specifically tell those hyperactive T cells to just, stand down and stop the attack.
And the crucial distinction here, based on all the dermatology guidelines we looked at, is that tacrolimus is not a steroid.
No, not a steroid at all.
Because topical steroids are usually like the heavy hitters for eczema, but they come with a massive long-term penalty, right?
They really do. I mean, steroids are incredibly effective at shutting down inflammation quickly, but if you use them over a long period, they cause something called skin atrophy.
Which is skin thinning.
Yeah, they physically thin the skin out, the collagen breaks down, the skin becomes super fragile, like almost translucent, and you can actually start to see the blood vessels underneath.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare, especially for sensitive areas. I'm assuming that's why tacrolimus is considered like a holy grail for certain patients, because it can shut down the immune response without degrading the actual structure of the skin.
That is the exact clinical trade-off. Because tacrolimus doesn't cause that atrophy, dermatologists heavily rely on it for treating the face, the eyelids, the neck, skin folds.
Oh, the really delicate spots.
Exactly. These are areas where the skin is already naturally thin and delicate. You absolutely cannot afford to make eyelids sing any thinner than it already is with long-term steroid use.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So tacrolimus offers a way to maintain healthy skin in those vulnerable areas for years at a time.
But the barrier to entry is it's brutal. Looking at the pharmacological studies, up to 59% of users experience burning, stinging, intense warmth, or itching when they first start applying it.
It's a huge number of people.
And it's not like an all-day burn, right? It typically lasts about 15 to 20 minutes right after application. But for a lot of people, that 20 minutes is unbearable. One of the clinical studies noted that nearly 22% of patients just completely abandon the treatment.
Which is a tremendous loss from a healing perspective. I mean, you have a highly effective medication that could manage a chronic, painful condition indefinitely, but a fifth of the patients just throw the tube in the trash.
Right. It's like paying a painful toll just to get onto the fast lane to healthy skin, and the toll is just too high for them.
Exactly.
So if the goal of this deep dive is to figure out how to bypass that toll, I guess we first have to understand why the body is reacting so violently. Let's look at the physical state of the skin the moment that ointment makes contact, because it seems like the condition of the skin itself is kind of setting the stage for the burn.
Oh, the physical state of the skin is the primary culprit here, and it all comes down to a metric called transepidermal water loss, or TEWL.
Concepidermal water loss.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Think of a healthy skin barrier like a well-built brick wall. The skin cells are the bricks, and the natural lipids and fats are the mortar holding it all tightly together.
Got it.
When that wall is intact, it does two things. It keeps moisture trapped inside your body, and it keeps environmental irritants out.
But in someone having an eczema flare-up, that wall is just crumbling. The mortar is gone, the bricks are loose, and the barrier is essentially broken.
The door is left completely wide open, and because the barrier is broken, the water inside the skin evaporates out into the air at a much faster rate.
Ah, so that's the water loss.
That evaporation rate is your transepidermal water loss. And the dermatologist can actually measure this to determine exactly how damaged a patient's skin barrier is at any given moment.
The data on this is wild, by the way. There was a study we reviewed where researchers used a device called a vapometer.
Right, the vapometer study.
Yeah, they pressed it against the cheeks of patients to measure their water loss right before they applied the tacrolimus ointment. The gap between the patients who felt the burn and those who didn't is just staggering.
The numbers paint a very clear picture. The patients who ended up experiencing that intense, fiery burning sensation, they had an average water loss of about 113.7 grams per square meter per hour.
Wow. And the patients who applied the exact same ointment but didn't feel the burn.
Their water loss was only 27.5.
So the people who experienced the pain were losing water at like more than 4 times the rate of the people who didn't. Their skin barrier was severely compromised.
Severely. And this is where the physical mechanics of the burn really begin. If your water loss is that high, your skin barrier is practically non-existent.
So the door is gone.
The door is gone. So when you take a dense ointment loaded with active medication molecules and spread it over that broken barrier, there is nothing to slow it down. A massive flood of tacrolimus molecules just rushes into the deep layers of the skin all at once.
I see the cruel irony in this biology. The sicker your skin is, and the more damaged the barrier, the more you actually need this medication to heal. But because the barrier is so damaged, the medication crashes in like a flood, meaning the people who need it the most are the ones who are going to suffer the most pain applying it.
It is a devastating clinical paradox. The more severe your flare-up, the higher your water loss, and the greater the initial shock to your localized sensory nerves.
It makes so much sense.
But that sudden flood of molecules is really just the physical entry point. To understand the actual sensation of fire, like why it feels like heat and not just a physical pressure, we have to look at what those meditation molecules are doing once they crash through that broken door.
Okay, so the floodgates open, the tacrolimus rushes in, and it immediately trips 2 distinct biological alarms. Let's break down the first one, which involves the nervous system.
Yeah.
What exactly is the medication hitting to make the brain register, fire?
Well, it hits a specific sensory receptor called the TRPV1 channel.
TRPV1.
Yeah. This receptor sits on the nerve endings in your skin, and its primary job in human evolution is to detect dangerous environmental heat. Like if you touch a hot stove, TRPV1 is the alarm system that tells your brain to pull your hand away right now.
But it's also the chili pepper receptor, isn't it? Like the same one that reacts to spicy food.
It is, yeah. TRPV1 is the exact same channel that detects capsaicin, which is the active chemical in chili peppers. Your body basically uses the same alarm for actual physical heat and for the chemical heat of a pepper.
Oh, wow.
So when that massive flood of tacrolimus rushes through the broken skin barrier, it inappropriately binds to and activates these TRPV1 channels.
Your nerves are quite literally shouting at your brain, we are touching a hot stove, or we just rubbed chili peppers on our face, even though it's just a, room temperature medical ointment.
The sensory illusion is incredibly powerful, but it actually goes beyond just a feeling. When TRPV1 is activated like that, it stimulates those sensory neurons to release neuropeptides into the surrounding tissue.
What kind of neuropeptides?
One of the main ones is called substance P. You can think of substance P as basically biological shrapnel.
Biological shrapnel. I like that. So it's not just setting a signal up to the brain, it's actually causing chaos right there in the skin.
Exactly. It promotes what we call local neurogenic inflammation. The nerves themselves are dumping chemicals that cause the surrounding blood vessels to dilate and the tissue to swell. Your nervous system is basically creating a fiery, inflamed environment around its own nerve endings in response to the drug.
That fully explains the heat and the stinging. But you mentioned a second alarm, and this one involves the immune system, specifically the mast cells. But wait, if it's binding to mast cells, I thought those were strictly for acute allergies.
Right, that's what we usually associate them with.
Like when someone is allergic to peanuts or gets hives from a bee sting, why is an eczema cream triggering an allergy cell?
That is the brilliance of what the researchers discovered. They actually took a fluorescently labeled version of tacrolimus, so they literally made it glow so they could watch exactly where it went under a microscope.
Oh, that's clever.
Very. And they watched it bind directly to a specific receptor on the surface of mast cells called MRGPRX2.
But if it's hitting an allergy cell, is the patient actually allergic to the cream? Because that seems like a massive problem.
The crazy part is they aren't actually allergic to it.
Mhm.
Normally, a true allergic reaction requires your body to produce specific antibodies, IgE antibodies that recognize an invader like peanut protein or bee venom.
Right.
But tacrolimus bypasses the antibody system entirely. It acts like a skeleton key, fitting directly into that MRGPRX2 receptor on the mast cell and triggering what we call a pseudoallergic reaction.
A pseudo-allergy. So the mast cell doesn't know the difference. It just feels the key turn in the lock and reacts.
It instantly degranulates. Imagine a water balloon filled with inflammatory chemicals suddenly bursting open.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, the cell dumps its entire payload of biological weapons, things like tryptase and various inflammatory cytokines, directly into the skin.
It's like the medication is maliciously pulling the cellular fire alarm. There's no actual fire. There's no real allergic reaction. There are no antibodies involved. But all the emergency sprinklers go off anyway.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The tissue gets flooded with these harsh chemicals, which perfectly explains why patients feel that intense, localized itch and burning pain.
It is a massive coordinated false alarm. You have the nervous system shouting heat through the TRPV1 channels, and you have the immune system shouting allergy through the bursting mast cells.
So putting myself in the shoes of someone standing in their bathroom staring at themselves in the mirror while their face feels like it's melting off. Why on earth would I keep using this? If the medication intrinsically sets off all these alarms, why does the burning usually resolve within a few days to a week? Does the body just, get used to the pain?
It doesn't just get used to it. The body is physically altered by the constant presence of the drug. This is the biological plot twist that makes tacrolimus so fascinating.
Okay, I love a plot twist.
If you push through the initial pain and keep applying it consistently, the drug forces the fire to put itself out.
Wait, how does it do that? Does it break the alarm?
Essentially, yes. Long-term, consistent exposure to tacrolimus powerfully suppresses the expression of that receptor on the mast cells.
The MRG whatever receptor?
The MRGPRX2 receptor, yeah. The cells get so overwhelmed by the constant false alarms that they pull those receptors back inside the cell membrane to protect themselves. They literally hide the button so the medication can't press it anymore.
Oh, wow. So it takes away the lock, making the skeleton key completely useless.
Furthermore, because the mast cells have spent the last few days bursting open and dumping all their inflammatory chemicals, they are completely depleted.
They're just empty.
The mast cells simply have no tryptase or inflammatory cytokines left to release. The biological ammunition is just gone.
So the fire alarm is unplugged and the sprinkler system is empty.
Mm-hmm.
That makes so much sense. But reading through the pharmacology notes, there's another really weird piece to this puzzle involving a cold receptor.
Ah, yes, the TRPM8 receptor. Tacrolimus doesn't just hit the heat and allergy receptors, it also activates the body's primary receptor for sensing cold and menthol.
Which sounds completely chaotic.
Yeah.
Your skin is receiving signals that it's touching a hot stove, having an allergic reaction, and rubbing against an ice cube all at the exact same time.
The initial sensory confusion is extreme, to say the least. But over time, the constant activation of this cold receptor does something incredible to the central nervous system.
What does it do?
Activating TRPM8 repeatedly sends a signal up to specific processing centers in the spinal cord. Over the course of a few days, this constant cold signal actually rewires how the spinal cord processes pain, effectively blocking hypersensitive nerve pain.
There's wild. The drug that causes the pain initially is actually changing your spinal cord circuitry to make you less sensitive to pain in the long run. The cure literally requires pushing through the cause.
Exactly.
But I really want to emphasize this for you listening. Consistency is everything here. If you apply the ointment, it burns, you get scared and stop, and then you try again a week later.
You're back at square one.
In that week off, the mast cells have rearmed. They've rebuilt their payload of inflammatory chemicals, and they've pushed the receptors back to the surface.
Oh, man.
The painful cycle completely resets. You have to endure that first few days of consistent application to force the cells to deplete their ammunition.
Okay, so if the core issue is this broken door, letting too much medication flood the nerves at once, and we know we have to push through it to empty the mast cells, is there a way we can physically manage that flood? How do dermatologists actually help patients survive that first week without quitting?
There are three main tactics clinically proven to help patients bridge the gap. And the first one relies on temperature.
The fridge hack.
Yes, the fridge hack. Keep the tube of tacrolimus in the refrigerator. By pre-cooling the ointment, you physically blunt the activation of those TRPV1 heat receptors when you apply it. The cold temperature counteracts the chemical heat signal.
It's simple but highly effective, though you have to be careful with the physical properties of the ointment itself, right?
Very true.
The sources had a funny but serious caveat: don't leave it in the back of the fridge for a week. Tacrolimus ointment is largely paraffin-based. If it gets too cold, it turns into a solid brick, and you won't be able to squeeze it out of the tube.
Exactly. You just want to cool it down enough to take the edge off before application, not freeze it solid.
Right. Okay, so what's the second tactic?
The second tactic addresses the root physical problem, the extremely high transepidermal water loss. If the barrier is broken, we can temporarily build an artificial one.
You know, this actually clears up a massive contradiction I noticed in the research notes. We reviewed a clinical trial where researchers took a group of patients who were in so much pain they were ready to quit the medication entirely.
Right.
The doctors told them to mix the tacrolimus in a 1-to-1 ratio with an over-the-counter moisturizer
Right.
and apply that diluted mix. And it worked beautifully. 12 out of the 13 patients who were about to quit were able to successfully continue treatment.
It's incredible.
The moisturizer acted as an artificial barrier, slowing down the absorption rate so the nerves didn't get flooded all at once.
That is a brilliant clinical workaround.
But here's the contradiction. The NHS hospital guidelines we looked at are incredibly strict about not doing this.
Yes, they are.
They explicitly tell patients not to apply emollients or moisturizers within an hour of applying tacrolimus because it dilutes the drug and makes it less effective. It's essentially the classic battle between textbook pharmacology and real-world human tolerance, isn't it?
That is precisely the tension. The hospital guideline is aiming for 100% ideal pharmacological absorption. In a laboratory setting, sure, you want the drug entirely undiluted for maximum efficacy.
Right.
But the clinical trial recognizes human reality. Ideal absorption is completely useless if patient compliance drops to zero because the pain is just intolerable.
Exactly. If they throw it in the trash, it's doing zero good.
If diluting the ointment 1-to-1 with a moisturizer is the only way a patient can tolerate it enough to get through that first week, then dilution absolutely wins. Practicality has to overrule perfection.
Makes total sense.
And once the skin barrier starts to heal and the mast cells are depleted, the patient can always transition to using the pure, undiluted ointment.
Right. You do what you have to do to get through the initiation phase, which leads perfectly into the third tactic, the steroid bridge. If the root cause of the intense initial burn is that broken skin barrier, you can actually use a different medication to temporarily fix the door before you send in the tacrolimus.
Yes, dermatologists will frequently prescribe a topical steroid for just 3 to 5 days at the very beginning of a flare-up. The steroid acts like a rapid response repair team. It brings down the severe inflammation instantly and physically heals the skin barrier, drastically lowering the water loss.
And because you were only using the steroid for a few days, you avoid that long-term skin thinning side effect we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You use the steroid just long enough to rebuild the brick wall. Then, once the door is mostly repaired, you seamlessly switch to the tacrolimus for the long-term, daily maintenance.
That's so smart.
Because the barrier is intact, the tacrolimus absorbs slowly and naturally, rather than flooding in all at once. The burning sensation is drastically reduced or eliminated entirely. It's an incredibly elegant biological workaround.
Before we wrap up the practical management, though, we do need to mention a critical safety warning that popped up in all the medical guidelines. And this isn't about a biological burning sensation. This is about an actual, literal fire hazard.
It's a vital warning. Because tacrolimus ointment is made with a heavy paraffin base, it can build up over time. If you use a lot of it day after day, that paraffin can soak into your clothing, your pajamas, or your bed sheets.
Oh, wow.
And if you are near an open flame, like a candle, a fireplace, or a cigarette, those paraffin-soaked fabrics become highly flammable.
So the medication won't spontaneously combust on your skin, but the buildup on fabrics is a documented hazard. The guidelines recommend washing your clothes and bedding regularly on a hot cycle to strip the paraffin out.
And the best way to prevent buildup in the first place is to avoid over-applying the ointment. Patients should stick to the medical standard of 1 fingertip unit, or FTU.
Which is how much, exactly?
It's the amount of ointment squeezed from a standard tube that covers the tip of an adult's index finger down to the first crease. That single line of ointment is scientifically calibrated to be enough to cover an area of skin roughly the size of 2 adult palms.
So you don't need to slather it on like you're icing a cake or, applying sunscreen. A very thin layer is all your skin can absorb anyway. Everything else is just excess paraffin soaking into your clothes.
Right, exactly.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. If you were listening to this and you've just started using tacrolimus or you're holding a tube and you're terrified to put it on, you now possess the knowledge to conquer that first week.
You know that the initial burn is not an allergic reaction in the traditional sense, and it is certainly not a sign that your body is rejecting the medicine.
It is simply a temporary mechanical issue. Your broken skin barrier is letting the medication rush in too fast. This triggers a temporary cellular false alarm, tricking your TRPV1 heat receptors and forcing your mast cells to dump their inflammatory chemicals.
But armed with that knowledge, you can absolutely fight back. By keeping the tube in the fridge, temporarily mixing it with a moisturizer to slow absorption, or using a short steroid bridge to fix the barrier first, you can safely navigate those first few days.
And if you stay consistent, the medication will naturally unplug those alarms, paving the way for long-term steroid-free healing.
Yes.
Before we go, there is a fascinating ripple effect to this biology that I just can't stop thinking about. We just spent this whole deep dive analyzing how tacrolimus manipulates these complex cellular alarms, particularly how it activates that TRPM8 cold receptor to rewire pain signals.
It is a profoundly complex molecule. But tacrolimus belongs to a specific family of drugs called macrolides. And in our research, we found that its chemical cousin, a drug in the exact same family called rapamycin, targets those exact same cellular pathways. But rapamycin isn't an eczema cream.
Far from it. Rapamycin is currently making massive waves across the entire field of biology. It is one of the only FDA-approved drugs that has been scientifically proven to slow the aging process and extend lifespan in mammals.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, it does this by inhibiting a master cellular pathway called mTOR, which regulates how cells grow, divide, and eventually die.
It is just wild to think about. We are looking at these macrolides, seeing how they manipulate immune cells, how they force receptors to hide inside the cell membrane, and how they alter cold-sensing pain pathways in the spinal cord. And in that exact same family of molecules, we find the mechanisms that regulate cellular aging itself.
It's all connected. If these ancient cellular pathways, pain, inflammation, and the aging process, are all so deeply interconnected, could the molecular mechanisms hiding inside your frustrating burning eczema cream hold the fundamental clues to the fountain of youth?
It certainly frames the localized inflammation of eczema in a much grander biological context, doesn't it?
It's definitely something to ponder the next time you apply it. Just remember, when you feel that heat on your skin, well, it's not a chili pepper. It's just your mast cells throwing a very temporary, very manageable tantrum.